I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, Lyndon Baines Johnson, do solemnly swear.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
I, William Jefferson Clinton.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Leaders, protectors, history makers. There is one job at the top that guarantees your name in the history books. A job that pledges to defend the Constitution and guard the free world. Freedom, liberty, and justice. The cornerstones of democracy and the oath of the President of the United States. Throughout the storied history of this great nation, many presidents have left their mark from this high office, and the actions they take decide the fate of millions of Americans. The personalities and gestures of each become part of their impenetrable legacy. Join us as we take an in-depth look at the journey of some of the most influential people in the history of humankind. These are the presidents.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will to the best of my ability.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
David Kay, the man America sent to Iraq to find weapons of mass destruction, returned to Capitol Hill today.
I think we'll find him either there or in some other country.
It turns out we were all wrong, probably, in my judgment. And that is most disturbing.
I'm embarrassed for our country.
In the early years of the 21st century, the United States faced unprecedented challenges and pivotal moments that would come to define an era.
America must not ignore the threat gathering against us. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
At the center of this turbulent chapter in American history stood a man whose leadership would leave an unforgettable and controversial mark.
And so to protect our citizens, the free world must succeed in Iraq.
The anti-war movement has taken to the streets.
Change the direction of this country!
Presidents making decisions through executive orders that can lead to all kinds of collateral damage. People die.
America's decided on its enemy. The wanted posters are out for Afghan-based Osama Bin-Laden, and the people here back military action to get him.
As the world bid farewell to the 20th century, the dawn of the new millennium brought with it a sense of anticipation, an era where the possibilities seemed boundless, and the world held its breath in anticipation of what lay ahead. George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States. This is not just the story of George W. Bush, but a journey through a presidency marked by unprecedented events that would forever shape the world.
Young George Bush was in Detroit last night when the final vote making his father the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party came through.
Well, I was excited. It's a great thrill to be standing up there with see your father
be nominated vice president, or nominee for his party to be vice president of the United States. And we had a tremendous time, really a lot of fun, and one of these days I'm going to realize I'm tired.
Bush Jr. had a somewhat complicated relationship with his father because he wasn't the star student and he suffered from alcoholism, and there were real low points in his life.
Now Bush says he's tired and has a lot of personal business to take care of here in the Permian Basin. But he will be watching for the Democratic convention, and he predicts problems in that camp will make the Republican convention look like a picnic.
There weren't necessarily high hopes for him. He wasn't an academic superstar. He wasn't the most articulate person. And there were higher hopes for his brother, Jeb Bush. But he had something that Clinton had. He had that ability to really appeal to the common man. He had something that his own father didn't have.
People can't see rewards for their work. And one of the things our government has got, cattlemen, same thing. 3 years of... I made the announcement that we would have no Governor Reagans or President Fords or George Bushes or John Connallys come in this district to campaign on my behalf. And I did so because I wanted the people to concentrate on the candidate, to realize that we can represent this district in Washington, D.C., and we do not need the help of people outside of West Texas campaigning for us.
George W. Bush attended Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, before earning a bachelor's degree in history from Yale University in 1968. Despite his reputation as a college fraternity member and sports enthusiast, he would soon embark on a transformative journey, joining the Texas Air National Guard during the Vietnam War.
I will keep America moving forward, always forward, for a better America, for an endless, enduring dream and 1,000 points of light. This is my mission, and I will complete it.
George W. Bush lived in the shadows of his father's presidency, observing the complexities of governance and the weight of leadership. His role during this time was not merely that of a bystander. Rather, he navigated the balance of being the son of the President of the United States. This period laid the groundwork for his soon-to-come political aspirations. It was a chapter of observation and learning, where he absorbed both the triumphs and tribulations that would later shape his own presidential journey.
This victory tonight is a great honor. The vote carries with it an awesome responsibility. Texas is ready for a new generation of leadership, and I will provide that.
As governor, Bush navigated bipartisan cooperation, showcasing his ability to work across party lines.
His ability to come across as just like any average American, the person that you could have a beer with.
What Texans can dream, Texans can do.
Embracing his role with a mix of Texas charm and conservative principles, Bush implemented significant policies that left a lasting impact on the state.
He was lacking a lot of that political skill, the savviness about policies and encyclopedic knowledge about how things work. So he lacked the ability to articulate himself. He appealed to the average American.
By freeing our teachers and principals and parents and school board members from centralized control so we can have excellence in the classroom for every child.
His successful re-election in 1998 laid the groundwork for his presidential aspirations.
As of today, if the opinion polls are to be believed, this man is the next president of the United States. Despite persistent allegations of sex, drugs and rock and roll in his youth, Governor George W. Bush Jr. of Texas seems immune so far to the 90s contagion here of sleaze and disgrace.
The 2000 presidential campaign was one of the most dramatic and contentious in American campaign history, with George W. Bush emerging as the Republican nominee. In a closely contested race, he faced off against Democratic nominee Al Gore, who had been vice president to Bill Clinton for previous 2 terms.
I'm running against a tough opponent, make no mistake about it. He's a good campaigner and he's got a lot of confidence. So much so that he thinks he invented the internet. But if the man was so smart, how come every internet address begins with W?
The campaign was marked by intense debates on key issues, including education, taxation, and Social Security.
What makes you think this man's really up to it?
He's real. He may not get every sentence right, every syllable right, but he's got a good, honest message. I think you can trust him.
When Bush talks about morality in the White House, do you buy all that?
Do I value morality? You better believe it. I think Bill Clinton and Al Gore trashed the White House.
To watch the man they call W, George W. Bush, on the stump in the heartland, is to realize now that this extraordinary race for the White House this year is not about policy, it's about personality.
George Bush is not ready to be president of the United States.
Expect the rhetoric to get tougher still in the remaining few days. It will be a final week of scrambling from state to state, town to town.
I am happy to be in Allentown and to see all of you here.
Sometimes the candidates themselves not quite up to speed on which state and which town.
I'm happy to be in Fountain Hill before I...
But wherever he is, Al Gore is the one who must make something change in this last 8 days.
However, the most defining moment came during the aftermath of the election. It was a Tuesday night, November 7th.
This is no longer an election. This is like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, we just get stranger and stranger, as Alice said.
The race was close all night. One moment, Bush was in the lead. The next, Gore looked to be taking office.
I've been thinking this is just the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. No, I think this has been a very exciting democratic time.
America was fixed to their television sets.
How it could be given to one, taken back, now, oh, we're not sure again, just the back and forth, not sure. It's bizarre.
Soon, one fact would become clear. The election came down to whoever would win the state of Florida. But why? In the United States, the presidential election is determined by Electoral College, not the overall vote. The Electoral College consists of 538 electors, with each state having a set number of electors based on its representation in Congress and the rough population of each state. For example, in the year 2000, a highly populated state such as California held 54 electoral votes, whilst the less populated Delaware held 3. The candidate with the most populous votes in each state will win all of the electoral votes. There are 538 electoral votes in total, and it takes a minimum of 270 to win the presidency. During the 2000 election night, neither candidate had reached this threshold yet. Bush held 246 electoral votes, whilst Gore held 255. So it all came down to Florida's 25 electoral votes, the final state to count their vote. Whoever won the state of Florida would win the presidency.
A president who can unite, not divide. A president who'll go to Washington not with a party in mind, but with the people in mind. And I'll be that president.
George Bush and his campaign staff do think they've done enough to win this one, despite the hiccups of the last few days. But their confidence is not based on very much. In the key battleground states where this election will be decided, it is still desperately close.
When the polls finally closed in Florida, the results were too close to call, which triggered a recount by machine. When the recount had finished, Bush had a small lead of roughly 900 votes out of 6 million ballots. Such a small lead permitted Gore a recount by hand in 4 Florida counties. The recount concluded that Bush's lead had now shrunk to only 500 votes.
We need to get this over with.
Whoever that is, we're going to rally around that person. That's our president, that's our leader, and that's who we support.
The Florida Supreme Court granted Gore's request for a larger recount of now 70,000 ballots. But this revealed a problem in the balloting methods.
Forbes 32 and Bush 57.
In Palm Beach County alone, 29,000 ballots were found spoiled due to a hole-punching voting method and confusing balloting cards.
Tens of thousands of votes, known as hanging chads, proving impossible to tally. But there was another, less well-known scandal. Over 1,000 voters, most of them black Democrats, simply turned away from the polls because they were wrongly listed as criminals on a so-called felons list, which meant they were banned from voting at all.
The local electoral authorities just don't know what to do next.
Al Gore insisted that ignoring votes was ignoring democracy itself. The election night was now past 19 days, and a winner had not yet been declared.
Yesterday, Reverend Jesse Jackson led a march of Democrats and unhappy voters through West Palm Beach. They didn't want Al Gore to give up.
The statesmanlike thing for Al Gore to do is honor the people that voted for him and want him to continue to fight. If Al Gore lay down, then he would never get my vote again.
Hundreds from both sides onto the streets of Washington, enough to bring the Reverend Jesse Jackson to the courtroom steps to be greeted by the jeers of Bush supporters.
Craftsmen have made 2 clay models, one of Al Gore and one of George W. Bush, and they need to know pretty soon which dummy is going to be next in line.
Votes of Florida have been counted. They have been recounted. And tonight they have been certified. And we do not know yet who has won. The outcome of this election will not be the result of deals or efforts to mold public opinion. The outcome of this election will be determined by the votes and by the law.
At this point, the Supreme Court intervened in the landmark case, ultimately halting the dispute and recount. And George W. Bush won Florida's electoral votes, securing his victory.
Crowds in Texas erupt. 2:17 a.m., Mr. Gore calls Governor Bush, concedes defeat and promises, quote, to work with the president-elect on the handover of power.
I am totally amazed. I'm awestruck.
The decision was final. Bush had become the 43rd president of the United States.
Rarely has it ever been this close.
Al Gore had become the first presidential candidate in 112 years to lose the electoral votes but win the popular vote, with a lead of almost 550,000. The controversial win that secured his place in history served as a foreshadowing of what lay ahead.
Good morning, America. I'm Charles Gibson.
I'm Diane Sawyer, and it's Tuesday, September 11th, 2000.
I'm in London, 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, and 8 a.m. here in New York, live from the CNN Financial News
Beautiful outside, perfect September day with lots of sunshine. I'm going outside today.
Other than that, it's kind of quiet around the country. We like quiet. It's quiet. It's too quiet.
I had one. I saw the plane exactly going into the building. I was standing right there on 100 Church Street.
This just in, you are looking at some obviously very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning.
As we come on air, we have serious news of a major, possibly very tragic
effort up there. Yeah, now remember, oh my God.
My God.
That looks like a second plane.
I didn't see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
Yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway.
Get ready. King. Yes, king. Sound it out. Get ready. King. Sound it out. Get ready. King. What word? Kid. Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready. Steal. What word? Steal. Yes, steal. Read these words the fast way. Get ready. Playing. Yes, playing. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Boys and girls, pick your reader up and send 60 on page 153.
Sometime shortly after 10 a.m., the White House receives a call from the Pentagon. They believe there's a fourth hijacked plane heading towards the Capitol. They request permission to shoot down any identified hijacked commercial craft. Vice President Dick Cheney, without any hesitation, gives the order.
Mr. President, are you aware of the reports of the plane crash in New York? And is there anything
talk about later?
10:45 a.m. Bush addresses the nation from a school library in Florida.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America.
New York City is in shock. One of its most famous landmarks destroyed, thousands dead, and America is under siege.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
All I can tell you is that just put yourself in that position. It was your family member.
People was crying. People was jumping out the window.
Every one of these firefighters in here are our brothers. Every one of these police officers in here are our brothers.
It's just the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life.
I have spoken to the Vice President and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
The sheer horror and magnitude of the events shook the core of American society and reverberated globally. The attacks claimed the lives of nearly 3,000 innocent people and prompted the United States to embark on a complex journey of recovery.
I feel terrible for the people that we lost, some of whom I
talked to just 15 minutes before we lost him. And the city is going to survive. We're going to get through it. It's going to be a very, very difficult time. I don't think we yet know the pain that we're going to feel when we find out who we lost. But the thing we have to focus on now is getting the city through this.
People went to work that morning. They kissed their children goodbye and told them, I'll be back after work, and never came home, okay? And that's why I come down here. I come down here for the victims of 9/11 and to support the families of 9/11. I'm down here because I am an American.
I don't think anything will heal the loss of a loved one under any circumstance.
It's terrible, you know, unbelievable. I didn't think something like this could happen, especially in New York. I'm sorry for all the people that lost their lives there today. It's very sad. That's all I have to say.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens.
In the harrowing aftermath of the attacks, a chilling undercurrent of power and shadowy manipulations unfolded within the highest echelons of the U.S. government.
All I want to say here now is just our profound sympathy, obviously, of course, with the people of New York, and as we know, there are many British people missing as well.
Seizing upon the shock and vulnerability of the nation, a clandestine faction held together by egos and heroism exploited the tragedy to advance their own agenda. Whispers of influence resonated in the corridors of power as the president grappled with the gravity of the situation.
Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda.
The following night of the attacks at the Defense Intelligence Agency, a memo comes in from the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz. Whilst the DIA were conclusively confident that the attacks were from Al-Qaeda, located in Afghanistan, Wolfowitz's memo stated that the DIA's resources should be allocated to Iraq and not Afghanistan. Iraq, being a nation situated over 1,200 miles away, speaking a different language, and seemingly unrelated to each other, no doubt caused confusion within the offices of the DIA. Yet, this perplexing directive marked the initial sowing of seeds that would soon shape the course of the future.
It makes you wonder what our intelligence community is doing, to have something like this happen. How can this happen? It's amazing.
What happened on this day has left America in pain. New York this evening is a city of candles, of flowers, and of grief. Grief caused by the worst ever terrorist atrocity, an atrocity which America insists tonight will soon be avenged.
3 days later, on the 15th of September, George Bush gathered his top advisors at Camp David, a solitude retreat in Maryland. Historically, Camp David has hosted presidents all the way back to Franklin D. Roosevelt. The summit aimed to assess the situation, discuss the evolving response strategy, and formulate a comprehensive plan to address the unprecedented act of terrorism from Al-Qaeda. Amongst the summit were a group of individuals that were beginning to plot the trajectory of war for the next 10 years. Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz. As plans were discussed regarding the infiltration of Afghanistan and elimination of Al-Qaeda, Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld instead advocated for an attack on Iraq, asserting that its leader, Saddam Hussein, was operating under a mass conspiracy. They claimed he was the head of the snake of international terrorism. Amidst the deliberations, CIA and Director of Counterterrorism Joseph Cofer Black asserted to Bush himself, "Mr. President, we were attacked on September 11th by Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Saddam Hussein and Iraq have nothing whatsoever to do with this." Black's declaration reflected a clear stance within the intelligence community that the primary focus should be on Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda as the orchestrators of the 9/11 attacks.
America's decided on its enemy. The wanted posters are out for Afghan-based Osama bin Laden.
I don't blame anybody other than Osama bin Laden. He has brought nothing but death and terror wherever he goes, and now he's bringing it to the people of Afghanistan.
Later that day, a persistent Paul Wolfowitz sought a private audience with President Bush to present his plan to invade Iraq. Notably, this plan included a strategic move to cut off Iraq's major oil supplies. Given Bush's background in the oil industry, he found himself intrigued by the proposal and questioned Wolfowitz. "Why didn't you bring this up in the meeting?" The situation was complex. The Taliban, harboring terrorist groups hiding in caves, presented a challenging target, and Bush found himself grappling with an uncertainty. But the seeds had been planted, and over the coming months, a brewing storm of military action loomed not only over Afghanistan, but also over Iraq. The once unified focus on responding to the 9/11 attacks began to splinter, setting the stage for a geopolitical landscape that would witness profound changes and far-reaching consequences. On the 20th of September, 9 days after the attack, in a compelling speech, George W. Bush declares a war on terror and to invade Afghanistan.
For the last 9 days, the entire world has seen for itself the state of our union, and it is strong.
UK Prime Minister Tony Blair is present. He applauds, a symbol of unity.
Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion.
The goal of Afghanistan is clear, but the seeds of broader ambitions in Iraq are now firmly taking root.
The two leaders discussed the war against Afghanistan, the need to keep the international coalition together, and the search for progress in the Middle East, though President Bush said the action against the Al-Qaeda terrorist network did not depend on that.
There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind. We'll bring Al-Qaeda to justice, peace or no peace in the Middle East.
6 days later, Tony Blair brings the UK on board with his allied support.
I don't think there's any doubt at all that this threat is aimed at the whole of the democratic world. The United States has been singled out, but there is no doubt at all that these terrorists will regard us all as targets.
The collaboration between the US and the UK would play a crucial role in the subsequent military engagements.
Good afternoon. On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime. We are joined in this operation by our staunch friend, Great Britain.
Today's announcement is to put onto the FBI's top 10 list. One is Charles Kopp, who has been charged with the murder of a doctor in Western New York. The second fugitive is Osama bin Laden, charged with masterminding the attacks on 2 U.S. embassies last summer in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, responsible for the death of over 200 people.
On the 7th of October, the Allies launched their first attack on Afghanistan with airstrikes.
Great Britain, America, and other free nations are united today in our grief and united in our determination to fight and defeat this evil wherever it is found.
This environment is almost certainly hiding the world's most wanted man. Down there somewhere is Osama bin Laden. The advantage seems to be his, but before this year is out, the Americans have vowed to find him.
I'm sorry if, there are people in Afghanistan who are getting hurt, but it's the Taliban and Osama bin Laden that are doing it. If they would just come forward, this wouldn't have to happen.
But I can assure the American people, I am determined. I'm not going to be distracted. I will keep my focus to make sure that not only are these brought to justice, but anybody who's been associated will be brought to justice. Those who harbor terrorists will be brought to justice.
Whilst Bush continues to slowly reveal the greater plans of war, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld meets with General Tommy Franks in Tampa, Florida. General Franks was in charge of a large region in the Middle East, including Afghanistan and Iraq. Rumsfeld reveals to Franks to prepare his troops for an Iraqi invasion.
I think those who would anticipate that that it's sort of in quickly and out quickly in Afghanistan would not be pleased. I think those who expect that this building process continue over time until we reach a point where Afghanistan is satisfied that, in fact, it does have its own capability to maintain security inside its borders.
As the Afghanistan war and the interception of the Taliban continued, it was coming increasingly clear that Al-Qaeda's days were numbered.
Every day, he says, we are sending British troops back in coffins, but the army is still here. Our message is simple: get out of our country.
This crusade, this war on terrorism is going to take a while, and the American people must be patient. I'm going to be patient.
The year was coming to an end, and on December the 7th, the war in Afghanistan was concluded. The Taliban had collapsed, and bin Laden had fled.
Osama bin Laden and other terrorists are still in hiding. Our message to them is clear. No matter how long it takes, America will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
In other American wars, enemy commanders have come to doubt the wisdom of taking on the strength and power of this nation and the resolve of her people. I expect that somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan, there's a terrorist leader who is at this moment considering precisely the same thing.
We've captured or killed thousands of Al-Qaeda, and especially in Afghanistan. We'll continue to very aggressively pursue him, and I'm confident eventually we'll get him.
On December 28, 2001, against the backdrop of his ranch in Texas, President George W. Bush, flanked by General Tommy Franks, addressed the nation in a resolute press conference. They reassured the public that justice would inevitably find Osama bin Laden. Importantly, woven into the narrative of bringing bin Laden to justice, Bush continues a subtle laying of the groundwork for future military engagements. With measured words, he hints at the prolonged fight against terrorism beyond Al-Qaeda.
Therefore, the United States must be vigilant
must make sure we continue to focus on our homeland security measures, must disrupt, must use our intelligence gathering network to prevent the enemy from attacking. And so while I hope that 2002 is a year of peace, I'm realistic.
Little did the public know, these early statements were watering the seeds planted for the subsequent justification. Bush would then walk into his ranch with General Tommy Franks, giving him the orders to invade Iraq. The geopolitical landscape was tense. With the specter of Saddam Hussein and the elusive weapons of mass destruction looming large, Bush embarked on a determined path to prepare the nation for another military campaign. On the 29th of January, the president stated that Iraq was an enemy in an axis of evil speech.
The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.
The decision was made to invade Iraq days after 9/11. Now they needed to portray the war a justifiable one, with weapons of mass destruction and the dreamy idea of the USA liberating a suppressed state. President Bush navigated a complex web of global alliances and domestic sentiments, shaping a narrative that would set the stage for the Iraq War.
Helicopters winching aboard supplies of bombs and ammunition, food and fuel, for a conflict many on board believe is coming. Which is why, below deck, President Bush's speech was being followed intently by sailors too young to have yet experienced war.
However, no evidence of weapons of mass destruction was found, so leaders such as Dick Cheney began to lie.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Even level-headed Colin Powell changed his stance, claiming they had solid intelligence.
The neocons had convinced the likes of Colin Powell and Bush that there were weapons of mass destruction that were hidden somewhere.
Saddam Hussein and his regime have made no effort to disarm as required by the international community. Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
It will not be a war against Iraq. It will be a war to liberate Iraq.
The terrorists know that the outcome in the war on terror will depend on the outcome in Iraq.
One of them is a nurse, another a receptionist for an insurance company. Now they're training to kill.
It's not ours, it is Saddam Hussein's. If he will not disarm voluntarily, we will do it for him by force, and his regime will join the Taliban in the dustbin of history.
We are a peaceful people. But we know that sometimes, to safeguard peace, we have to fight.
Their first task, filling in forms with details of next of kin. These two are reserves, the army so stretched that a third of those in Iraq are part-timers. For these soldiers, it's no time to debate the whys and wherefores of this war, but to focus on how to stay alive.
Once again, the Hawks are back in the ascendancy. Just a week ago, President Bush sought to dampen the frenzy of speculation on Iraq.
Their mission, to make Iraq stable, yes, but mostly to go in order to come home safe.
America must not ignore the threat gathering against us. Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Donald Rumsfeld is about to come before the commission and is certain to be questioned about the Bush administration's alleged fixation with attacking a country with no Al-Qaeda connection, Iraq.
The free world
must succeed in Iraq.
Inevitably, Congress voted yes in favor of going to war with Iraq. Even politicians such as Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton got behind the decision.
Saddam Hussein will continue to increase his capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare.
Mr. President, there is no question that with regard to Iraq, we have a real and growing problem.
And on the 10th of October, authorization for the invasion was passed. The following year, in March 2003, Bush gave Saddam one last ultimatum, whilst his troops prepared along the Iraqi borders.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately.
Between the 19th and 20th of March, Operation Iraqi Freedom commenced. Both U.S. and UK special forces led the invasion. General Tommy Franks decided to target oil infrastructures first to weaken Saddam's position. Within days, Allied troops secured control of Saddam International Airport. 21 days after the initial invasion, coalition forces entered Baghdad, and Saddam Hussein's statue is famously pulled down, symbolizing the fall of the regime. On May 1st, 2003, President George W. Bush delivered an historic speech aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, marking a significant moment in the Iraq War.
Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free.
Against the backdrop of a banner proclaiming "Mission Accomplished," Bush declared major combat operations in Iraq to be over.
Bush knows that declaring victory would be somewhat premature. Saddam Hussein still has not been captured, and the weapons of mass destruction still have not been found.
The speech was intended to convey the success of the major military phase and the toppling of Saddam Hussein's regime. However, the mission was far from accomplished.
But given the situation in Iraq right now, achievements will be a hard sell. This week alone, at least 300 people were killed in attacks by insurgents. Most recent figures show an average of 87 attacks each day, the highest number so far. The deteriorating security situation has forced American forces to surrender key battlegrounds to the insurgents. Fallujah, Ramadi, Baquba and Samarra are all effectively in rebel hands. And then there's the growing hostage problem. More than 100 foreigners have been taken hostage in the last 6 months, and 30 have been killed. At the moment, at least 26 foreigners are still being held, including a Briton and 2 Americans.
Amidst the sun-baked landscapes of the post-invasion Iraq, the initial echoes of triumph started to dissipate. Fighting continued, and tragedy struck for the dictator with the death of Saddam's sons. The desolation intensifies as the United Nations headquarters in Baghdad became a target, succumbing to a devastating bombing that claimed the life of UN Special Representative Sergio Vieira de Mello. Meanwhile, the stage was set for disillusionment as David Kay, the chief weapons inspector, reported to Congress that Iraq possessed no stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction.
Have you found any weapons of mass destruction?
I barely found lunch.
David Kay, the man America sent to Iraq to find weapons of mass destruction, returned to Capitol Hill today to deliver the news the government didn't want to hear.
It's clear we've got a problem now.
But the man who searched in vain for those weapons told ITV News it would be better to acknowledge a huge intelligence failure.
To be honest, I don't think anyone thought, I certainly didn't think, it would take this long to find them. It turns out we were all wrong, probably, in my judgment. And that is most disturbing.
The narrative of mission accomplished truly began to unravel against the harsh realities of an insurgency. the international community were grappling with the consequences and the haunting absence of the very weapons that had been the pretext of the Iraqi war. Despite scrutiny back home, on December 13, 2003, Saddam Hussein was captured by U.S. forces near his hometown of Tikrit. Hussein subsequently faced trial and execution a few years later in 2006. However, Saddam Hussein's apprehension held particular significance and arrived in time for George Bush's re-election. Bush's alignment with conservative values on social issues, combined with his administration's war on terror, appealed to a significant portion of the U.S. public. And in 2004, George W. Bush secured re-election, undertaking his second term. Throughout George W. Bush's presidency, lurking in the shadows were a group of influential policymakers known as neoconservatives, or the neocons.
He was influenced by the neocons, led by his Vice President Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, his Secretary of Defense.
The neocons advocated for a robust approach that prioritized military actions to address perceived threats.
So he was able to get the U.S. public behind invading Afghanistan. This was where Al-Qaeda was hiding. This is where they had a home. This is where possibly Osama bin Laden was living. And the idea behind the invasion was that the U.S. would invade and they would eliminate Al-Qaeda and they would stabilize the region.
It was autumn 2002 when the drumbeat for war began growing louder. The White House leaking to the press that the CIA had, the year before, intercepted a container load of thousands of aluminium tubes sailing from China, destined for Iraq.
But when the neocons, led by Dick Cheney, his vice president, and Donald Rumsfeld, his Secretary of Defense, got involved and somehow convinced Secretary of State Colin Powell to give a speech at the UN declaring that Iraq was producing nuclear weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons. This is where things started to go south.
It was unlikely Saddam could use the tubes to build a bomb, or so concluded experts here at the US Department of Energy and at the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. But at the White House, no shadow of doubt.
And I think they adopted a lot of information that was at the time viewed as very weak, and they viewed it as fact. And that was a recurring problem.
So this is one of the big controversies about the invasion of Iraq. The neocons had convinced that there were weapons of mass destruction that were hidden somewhere, even though this was being monitored by international agencies. And of course, this proved to be false.
He gave us 3 reasons for going to war. 1, Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Number 2, there were connections to Al-Qaeda. And number 3, he was a horrible person. Well, only one of them turned out to be true.
Now, whether or not Bush Jr. knew personally that there weren't weapons of mass destruction and went along with it anyways, I mean, this we'll never know. He seemed to believe this, but there was absolutely no evidence of this.
The hope that danger has passed is comforting, is understanding, and it is false.
As a career diplomat and as an American citizen, I feel betrayed. It's a disgrace and a grievous offense against the nation to distort information in the way that this administration did.
Critics of the administration often characterized Bush as a puppet in the hands of these neoconservatives, asserting that they wielded significant influence over key decisions.
You have people who are in power, like George Bush, for example, really a puppet, you know what I mean? He wasn't in any way the guy calling the shots.
This is what peace looks like. We're going to change the direction of this country.
For the first time since they helped swing an election, the anti-war movement has taken to the streets. Tens of thousands of them.
This is George Bush and the Queen, as you will not see them in London this week, riding in an open carriage, surrounded and protected by anti-war demonstrators.
Well, we're here to report to President Bush that we found his weapons of mass destruction. They weren't in Iraq. They're located in Britain and in the United States.
In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks in 2001, President George W. Bush, along with his echelon of neocons, embarked on a comprehensive war on terror, seeking to root out global terrorism whilst profiting behind the scenes.
I realized the impossible, the unthinkable can happen, and that I had been, sort of betting that, well, no one will break into my house. The chances are very small, but when I saw something that was so inconceivable happen, such an act of violence, so close to home, that it tipped me, and I went and got the gun.
They're out to get you. Better make sure you can get them first. That seems to be the new mentality in America, where gun sales have rocketed since September 11th.
Shortly after September 11th, gun sales just went out of sight. We couldn't keep anything on the shelves. These shelves were basically bare.
In 2005, the London bombings further underscored the global nature of the terrorist threat.
This threat is aimed at the whole of the democratic world.
The following year, the bombing of the Al-Askari Mosque in Iraq intensified sectarian tensions. Meanwhile, North Korea's nuclear testing in 2006 added another layer of global insecurity.
I believe the proper use of power by America will make the world more peaceful, America more secure, and as importantly, people more free.
Against this backdrop, inevitably, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld resigned in November 2006, following the midterm elections.
Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld is about to come before the Commission and is certain to be questioned about the Bush administration's alleged fixation with attacking a country with no Al-Qaeda connection, Iraq.
The president reeling from his first full-blown scandal, though still determined to stand by his man.
You're doing a superb job. You are a strong Secretary of Defense, and our nation owes you a debt of gratitude.
Yet behind the show of unity, divisions festering. Dick Cheney pressing for Rumsfeld to stay, an aide to Condi Rice claiming she wouldn't mind if he went, though she's denied it.
The decision was seen as a response to the perceived mishandling of the Iraq War and a recognition of the need for a change in strategy. Discourse surrounding the war intensified in 2007 when President Bush announced a troop surge in Iraq, committing additional forces to quell the escalating violence to restabilize the region. Dick Cheney, former CEO of Halliburton, awarded his company substantial contracts for services in Iraq whilst maintaining stock options during his tenure as vice president.
There are important accusations that this was all about Halliburton, which was a company that was, where you saw Dick Cheney being involved in, being on the board of, and where you saw him personally benefiting from the reconstruction effort.
Simultaneously, Rumsfeld maintained ties to various defense contractors for financial gain from war profiteering.
I mean, there was billions of dollars to be made in reconstructing Iraq. Who benefited from that? The neocons.
Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz has taken a personal interest in getting this team together.
While the backdrop of Iraq's vast oil reserves added a layer of complexity,
there was a lot of accusations that this was really all about oil and ensuring that the U.S. had access to cheap oil.
My mom doesn't like the Army too much because,
took both her boys, and we're over here. You know, she hates that, but she's very proud, and nothing beats it. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
2003, they got us out here and back there. Life is hard. Got us pulling fucking 2 hours ago, and then they bump it up to 8 between 12. I don't give a fuck. I think I'm stuck in hell.
The tyrant has fallen, and Iraq, you're
On the 28th of June 2004, a year after Saddam Hussein was captured, the United States decided to dissolve the Iraqi army. This led to widespread unemployment and anger. As disenchanted soldiers joined the ranks, groups like Al-Qaeda in Iraq emerged.
They didn't do the planning, they didn't invest, they didn't study, they didn't involve people that knew how to speak the language. It failed.
By 2006, Al-Qaeda in Iraq merged itself into the Islamic State of Iraq, intensifying sectarian tensions.
At its worst, you had the Islamic State emerge from Al-Qaeda in Iraq that then created more instability and really elongated the war in Syria. It would not have been as long had there not been so much instability in Iraq and basically a base for the Islamic State to use in its conflict there.
The U.S. withdrawal in 2011 left a fragile political landscape, exploited by extremist groups.
But given the situation in Iraq right now, achievements will be a hard sell. Most recent figures show an average of 87 attacks each day, the highest number so far.
The military group Islamic State of Iraq expansion into Syria in 2013 transformed it into the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, also known as ISIS.
The red sun rose this morning. Dark skies pronounce your warning. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
The ensuing years witnessed international efforts to counter ISIS, with campaigns costing billions of dollars.
It was incredibly expensive, and you see today Afghanistan is right where it started.
At the moment, at least 26 foreigners are still being held, including a Briton and 2 Americans.
So you have a Middle East that has been shaped by the by the neocons, that is inherently unstable when there was so much promise.
'Cause we are the outlaws.
Because the American people now feel in majority that it was the wrong war.
In retrospect, they didn't find large caches of chemical or biological weapons
in Iraq. It was a big, fat mistake.
Do you think it undermines our trust of the government?
My brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did.
The president is the policymaker.
We spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it.
The disorder in the entire region is something that generally people had not anticipated.
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
Today, the general public agrees that what started as a poorly motivated and terribly executed invasion of Iraq has now snowballed into a catastrophic instability of the Middle East, costing thousands of lives and trillions of taxpayer dollars.
The war on terror cost the U.S. $2 trillion. It's $2 trillion of taxpayer dollars.
I think it's very important for people who are in leadership positions to behave responsibly if we expect our children to behave responsibly.
The decisions to embark on military interventions, particularly in Iraq, cast a long and divisive shadow, shaping not only the geopolitical landscape, but also fueling debates on ethics and the cost of global intervention. In the nuanced exploration of Bush's presidency, we grapple with the highs that define a presidency. But it is the controversies, the echoes of war, and the desire for power that leave an imprint, steering the course of a nation's future.